I would like to welcome everyone to a conversation between Sheila Hicks and myself. I'm at the MAK in Vienna, and Sheila is in her home in Paris. And the interview is hosted on the occasion of her exhibition at our museum with the title Thread Trees River.
Why this title?
Because I thought that looking at your work, weaving the patterns, the material that you use are very strongly connected to nature. And the museum itself is situated in Vienna next to the large park of the city, Stadtpark, and the Wien Fluss, the river and the canal. So I thought it was nice to connect your work and also your exhibition to the museum and Vienna.
If the weather had cooperated, the weather and the health requirements had cooperated, we were going to make things in the river in front of the museum.
Yes, but you also would have been there with me in the space during installing the exhibition. So we have been working on the show since 2018, and you actually have been here and saw the spaces and the museum and our collection. What was your impression?
Well, the fact that you had the river right in front made me think we could throw textiles in the river and let them swim and move and let them see how they would react in water, because I have a lot of textile ribbons and bands that are used sometimes in things like furniture for boats or for outdoor awnings and things. So it's the textiles that are not afraid of the water or the sun. So I still think I'm going to come back to the museum after the show's over. And I think I'm going to find a way to do something in the river in front, because I'm still dreaming of putting things and letting them flow and move with the water as it flows by the front of the museum. And then walking into the museum, I was thrilled, excited, amazed by this big hall of all these arches with the skylight. And I started thinking what I could do in that unique space, because there are not very many spaces in the world like this. And then as we moved along discussing possibilities, dreams, and taking note of what was happening around us in the world, we realized that we were not in charge. We had to adapt to all the other things that were happening. So this has been quite an adventure, this show, because it went through many, many transformations for me in my imagination of what it could be.
Yes, I think that it grew also through our conversations that we were lucky to have also in Paris. So the last time we met in person was in February last year, just before the lockdown started. And then we worked for several months on the exhibition, as a focus, and not really knowing what the outcome could be. But through this crisis, I think that the great chance was that most of the works that are in this show are from your own belongings and in your own from your own storage. So we didn't get loans from places around the world where your works are based in various collections, private and international, but it's all from your own material.
Thank God, because the show would have collapsed. Because with the lead time needed by many of the museums who would loan, they would have just simply told us to get lost because they couldn't adjust their schedules. It was so many unknown factors involved. But I'm kind of used to dealing with or navigating through all kinds of unknown factors. You know, I live in a country where for more than half my life, I've been speaking languages that are not mine by birth, that I'm every day learning new words and listening to new ways of doing things that I wouldn't necessarily know automatically. So I'm sort of continually improvising and staying awake to see how to move from one idea and one space and one opportunity to the next.
And in the 1960s, you took the opportunity to move to Paris. And how did this happen?
I was, prior to that, I was living in Mexico and liked very much living in Mexico and working. Before that, I lived briefly in Chile, in South America. But meeting French and meeting people who loved France, they would always say to me, when are you going to Europe and when are you going to visit France? They wouldn't tell me, when are you going to visit Istanbul? Or they just thought that somehow I should get to know France. I think it was because the textile culture is so strong in France. And history and the professional standards, the aesthetic standards for tapestry, thread, cloth, weaving, passementerie, all of these mental manual constructions. And people would thought it'd be a pity if I deprived myself from getting to know France. And then they'd also tell me quite often, you know, you really should go to Japan.
And
well,
you did.
And I did. I got to France and I thought they were right. We connected. France and I connected, and it's been a romance now for 50 years. And I always say I might be able to get married and move and do things. That's what happened to me, even to be married to an American now who's living in New York and not being able to see him during this whole period. But the fact that I'm here isolated in France and in the center and with a greenhouse, imagine a greenhouse in the middle of Paris, I can't complain. And I miss New York, and I miss the house that we had in Connecticut on a pond, very peaceful life, American style in a country. But I think I would have a very hard time getting divorced from France and separating myself from France. So I'm quite comfortable here, even in the midst of this tragic pandemic.
And you have a studio where you have colleagues to work with. And you told me that you also have actually several studios in Paris.
Depends how engaged we are with working on commissions. I enjoy very much working with architects on specific sites, specific places, spaces that are defined spaces. And when I have the opportunity to make something for a designated space, and if it takes a long time to execute and to make it, to realize it, I like to isolate it and put it in a quiet space with a team and work on it and make it separately from anything else going on. In other words, not a production center where you're working on 7 different ideas at the same time. I like to give each offspring its own special attention.
Mhm. Yeah, I noticed that as I visited you, and it's a completely different atmosphere in your studio than someone could imagine, as working with the thread from 9 in the morning until 5 or 6 in the evening with a small lunch break. But it's continuous, but it's also was interesting for me to see how you refer to the material itself, but also the theme of color in your work and through the weaving process.
I used to, early on, I used to walk my children to school through Luxembourg Garden and then have a coffee on the way back and sit and think, and then decide which studio to go to and check in spontaneously and see the progress and see the evolution of something that we would be making for a specific architectural site.
Mm.
It would almost be like the architects who have model makers and people who make a maquette, a model of a project, and they drop in and completely get absorbed in it and identify with it, and then pull out, go for lunch, cross the bridge, the Seine, walk across the Pont Neuf into another studio, and sort of all at once fall into another kind of space and challenge and problem. I mean, this is a kind of unusual way of working. You have to be up for changing, like changing clothes 4 times a day. But it appeals to me. I like this way of working.
And this working process, because early in your career as an artist, you started as a painter, but then you let the threads flow into your life. You studied with Josef Albers. You met Louis Barragan and became friends with him in Mexico. He actually installed your first exhibition. So how did you connect to these generations of artists and architects, and how did they how did they create a dialogue for you in order to develop your work?
I'm trying to think of from which angle to take this, because as you meet different people, some of them you forget, and some of them are unforgettable. The 2 you mentioned just now are unforgettable. Albers was my teacher when I went to the Yale Art School. I went there in 1954 until 57, and then went down to Chile on a Fulbright scholarship and came back up again to Yale again until 59. So I spent a good long while with Albers. How did he affect me or influence me? Well, he got a hold on my mental screen in terms of dealing, thinking, and working with color. It's never left me. So it's been a lifelong engagement with color. Then when I lived in Mexico, Matthias Gerritz took me to meet Barragan. And he also asked me to come and teach the sort of Bauhaus course of 2- and 3-dimensional design and color in the Universidad in Mexico City. So I'd go up and have lunch. I was living on a ranch in Guerrero, near Iguala. And I drive 2.5 hours up to Mexico City, give me time to think and organize my course and my thoughts, have lunch with Luis, and then go over and do this class in the afternoon with Matthias Gerritz. I mean, that was such an influential experience that stays with me even today. Because I had to move into a language, Spanish, and take a visual, physical world and bring it to people who were young architecture students. And then see what they would do with it and what they could do with it. That still affects me when I'm working today. Here in Paris, I still take these experiences because when you're young, the impressions go very deeply and they don't leave you. And so I'm still oftentimes even giving titles and emotional experiences in Spanish to things that I'm making here at my greenhouse in Paris. And thinking of Barragan too, because he encouraged me so much. Because he knew I wasn't a weaver. He knew I wasn't going to spend my life behind a loom. He could see I was curious and wanted to know about space and architecture. I'm totally dependent on architecture in my field of interest. Is very, very strong in architecture and photography. So I think I'm known as, sometimes it's a joke, I'm sort of known as a fiber artist or a textile artist or something like this. But that's sort of like the third or fourth thing on my list.
Well, you know, you make sculptures and installation with the means of the material of textile, but you know, the works showing in the exhibition, some of them are large scale. They're dominating or exploring the space, but also the relation to architecture in these exhibition spaces. And you have some works that are either referring directly to architecture, like this work that you made in relation to the building site when the large market in Paris was demolished to make a space for Leal. And so it was a statement for maybe like reflecting this important market, but also what you actually do think about tapestry. So it was architecture and tapestry at the same time.
When you say tapestry, that's a very loaded, specific kind of image. Because most people, when you say tapestry, traditionally think of pictorial weaving, hanging in chateaus in the Loire Valley in France or somewhere. I have commissions sometimes to design tapestries and to weave them in the Gobelin or in Aubusson. I did a series of these for the King Saud University in Riyadh. I've done them for other sites too, but I don't think of myself as a tapestry artist. And when we jump to this period we're living now, people, well, the Encyclopedia Britannica, one day my son pulled it off the shelf, a book, and said, look what it says here. Something about tapestry, when it says you're cited in this encyclopedia. I thought that was funny. I think I was sick in bed and he showed me this book. And it said I had helped tapestry leap off the wall into space.
Yeah.
So the times we're living now and the exhibition you're having now, probably that would be a way to define this exhibition. we have textile or tapestry or fiber or material leaping off the wall into space. So it's bidimensional. Now, does it have a certificate or a passport? Can it come into the sculpture world? Will the sculpture world allow it to come through the gate?
Certainly, because it is also sculptural, or it is also sculpture, or it is sculpture. And the work that I mentioned before, Le Desmoulois, he showed it at the Biennial for Tapestry in French in 1977. And you told me that it actually produced, you know, a large discussion on what tapestry means in France, because it was completely contemporary.
You know, I'll step back a moment. Remember, you said something about Les Halles and the construction in Les Halles. I had a studio over there on the right bank on the Rue Bourdonnais, not far from what was the Samaritan. And across, they were digging this hole. They demolished 4 entire city blocks there, digging holes. And to protect the people living in apartments all around the big hole, the excavation, they hung drapery or big bâches like they do in construction sites. And they put scaffolding, and the workers would go up and down the scaffold and crawl, but they'd be protected by this flowing textile that was hung from the scaffolding. So when it rained and when there was wind, can you imagine how beautiful that was if you were on your balcony and looking across this big hole and seeing all of the neighbors all around all the neighborhood with all of these trembling cloths that were masking the buildings as they were constructing the big commercial center in Les Halles. I thought that was so impressive to find in an urban center, you know, because we were surrounded by stone, concrete, glass, and then all at once a whole area just of moving, flowing textile. That was the inspiration for what I call démêloir, the 3 panels that you have in your exhibition, which you can collapse, stuff into a bag, into a sack, put it in the trunk of your car, and drive it anywhere and spread it out and start to imagine how to hang it like a stage set. Even in your atrium, the image behind you from any of these arches or from the balcony or from the skylight, when you start to drop cloth with gravity and let it do its own thing, a small miracle happens. You sort of have an emotional response.
Mm-hmm. And that's only possible because it's actually textile. You know, usually, you know, you can't twist and change installations or works in that way, you know, reacting to a space. And this exhibition in Vienna, which I hope you're actually going to see somehow. I don't know how that would be possible for you, but I think you must see these works in these large-scale spaces because they let the works, you know, develop their own gesture. And in one gallery is dedicated to the so-called prayer rug works. And I found it really interesting because you looked at the ambiguity between, you know, the prayer rugs used in the religious practice, but you actually put them on the wall as a gesture, and also referring to the architecture in the Medinas. That I found was an interesting shift, but also, you know, the the reference of cultural appropriation and also openness. And how would you describe this image of the open arch or the arch itself?
You're surrounded, you're probably,
I am, yes, yeah.
surrounded by arches. Behind you are all these beautiful arches. I mean, it's one of the strongest architectural shapes, forms, with the columns holding these arches. If you would drop a pliable surface, a pliable cloth, into each arch and let it do its own thing. Let people, children, visitors to the museum walk around the arch, the arcade. They would cause the air movements of these flowing cloths hanging from these arches. So you'd have the strong definition of the arch, but then you'd have this moving, magical, negative space of the cloth. And I think that that is a challenge to me, to take something that has that much range of possibility of expression in our heavily constructed urban world, and to soften it and to introduce mystery into the firmly constructed spaces. It's allowing a woman to walk through a long corridor and to dream.
That's a beautiful image. And it also reminds me that in our conversations, you once mentioned to me, you know, when we talked about how it was, you know, working as an artist in the 60s and 70s, if it was male or dominated, or how you perceived it. And you even once said to me, you don't want to be called a female artist. Can you explain that?
Well, I didn't feel like I should, if someone handed me a flag and told me to march in a parade, and it was for a good cause, I would do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, if they handed me another flag and told me to march in the parade and it was for another cause, and if I believed in it, I would do that. And I wouldn't like to be marked by someone, a policeman on the corner, saying, "What are you doing? You're walking in all these parades and they're all for different purposes or reasons. I mean, humanitarian or social or political. Why don't you stick to just one category or one thing?" And I just don't want handcuffs on my imagination. I like to move in and out of all different kinds of engagements. So please don't put labels on me, if possible. Just give me a free space and free ticket.
But that also means that your situation, working as an artist, you didn't feel discriminated in your field.
I think I was too busy to notice.
Mm-hmm.
I never was bored, and I never was lacking for something to do. I think it was a characteristic that my mother and father told me was noticeable very early on. That leave her alone, she's not bored, she's always finding something to do. Mm-hmm. So they more or less gave me also that kind of open ticket. I don't know how if you felt directed or overwhelmed by others wanting to put names or categories or projects for you, or if you would start the day by just opening the window and see what was flying by.
Mm. So what would you have an advice for young artists today?
Yes, open the window.
Mhm.
Open the window, breathe, look, and have enough courage to go downstairs and go outside.
That's a beautiful, yeah, beautiful saying.
Yes, I have granddaughters, and I think they're one of them's turning 21 next week.
Mm.
And today it does take courage to open the window or to open the door and to go outside, instead of thinking that you have to find ways to protect yourself from what is happening out there.
And how do you open now the window during this Corona crisis? You're one of the very few artists who actually have a large solo exhibition. We also have been affected by lockdown at some point in December and January, but we are able to reopen. But you know, now it's going on since 1 year. Like how do you cope personally?
I've learned so much because prior to this, I didn't understand or know very much about Zoom, online visits, things like we're doing today. I was more in a closed atmosphere, working. And then in the network of gallery system, where you show your work in a gallery, then if lucky in a museum. But we've opened up so many other possibilities now of being able to show your work online and in different ways, in different formats and different techniques, technically. I find we're in a very creative period of expansion. Instead of thinking of it as closure, I'm thinking of it as opening. I'm glad I'm living long enough to see all of these new openings happening. Of course, I mess up enough being unaware and not technically brilliant with all of the new technology. But all these accidents that happen, even when I'm working with all these new techniques, are quite funny and fun.
So how was it for you when, you know, we actually had to, when we were installing in Vienna and I was on one side and you were on the other side in Paris? How was that for you to watch over these 2 or 3 weeks, you know, not being able to be fully in control, and, you know, even through video or photographs, you can't ever communicate a space or how an artwork looks like in reality over the internet. It's just not possible. So,
but you open up and you say, why not? In the sense you say, it's not how I preconceived it, but something else is happening. And so please go in the other room and come out another door and show me how it looks from another angle. And then sit down on the floor and then show me again and hand the computer or the camera, the iPhone, to someone and have them walk around the room and raise and lower the iPhone as they're walking around the room. And you're getting a whole different perception of things. And you're beginning to be like a bird, to move in the space. You're not just grounded as a pedestrian who walks into an exhibition. It's pretty amazing. It's like the cameras that are now able to lift and give you aerial views, you know, of landscapes. Of course, landscape, I'm very connected to landscape, and the idea of to be able, now I can be up in the tree and looking down at something. Now I can be on the ground. Now I can be under the mushroom looking up. All of these are openings. of your imagination. You close your eyes. A lot of the ideas come to me when I have my eyes closed, not even looking. Closed and thinking, and then I see something. I see something with my eyes closed. And I get up and I think, I better go and write this down or make a sketch or do something before I forget it.
In your apartment, you have a very special room that you also like to use to think or to work. It's full with plants. Would you like us to us see the room as well? Do you think you could give us a little tour?
I think I could if it would be daylight, but it's now become almost nighttime here.
Oh, okay. But you have some of the works here you showed me before that you're working on, like this, like a textile of silk, which was treated. Yeah, this one. These are the mimim frames, and you work in this form and shape since the 1950s, and you carry them around with you all the time. In the exhibition, actually, we show about like 25 of them. So this is just the start of the work.
It's the beginning.
It's the beginning.
Mhm.
And do you have a concept for it already, or is it you take day by day?
Minute by minute.
Minute by minute.
Here's a package that came in the mail today.
Mm.
Actually, it was a book that was wrapped, a big book that came wrapped. And I took the book out, and the book looked interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But the package was even more, the crumpled paper, when I crumpled it up to put it in the wastebasket, took on a shape that I thought was really interesting. So I took some threads and took the crumpled paper and crushed it and wrapped it. And now it has a life of its own, and it's sculptural. Can you see it? It's dimensional.
Yeah.
And this could become, if I had the energy tomorrow, and if I got 4 books in the mail, I could take 4 of them and join them together and make it immense. And it might be even bigger than the arches in your museum.
But would you like make a constellation, like where you have several next to each other, or?
Looking at all these arches in your background there, and I'm thinking how funny it would be to be hanging these constellations from little threads in your arches. I think the children would run by and poke them and make them bounce.
Mm-hmm.
And you would get mixed up between which were people and which were bulbs. And if you had fans moving, fans and ventilators, the whole place would start to tremble in between all the arches with all of this life going on, of these moving things. We still have to keep working on your exhibition.
Yes, that would be fantastic to expand to the museum. But the way you describe your artworks, we have a question from the audience asking.
May I ask if you're closed or open these days?
We are open.
Good.
Yeah. We are open, and I don't think we are going to close. Your exhibition is on until the 18th of April. But there was just one question from the audience. If you like classical music, so if you like Brahms or Mozart, are you relating your work to music at all?
Is this a planned question? Because
no, it isn't. It's from the audience.
Because the show that I'm going to make in London this spring, is going to be about music.
Oh, really? That's fantastic. It's a coincidence. Or it's telepathy, I don't know.
As you know, when you're solfège music, when you have the lines where you put the notes that you're going to play on in the music.
Yeah.
I'm working on the idea that the warp, when you stretch threads like this, you usually think of a loom or something when you stretch it. But suppose you turn the loom sideways and you have a musical page ready to compose your music. Do you see what I'm doing?
Mhm.
So I'm thinking I'm going to take things that are usually thought of in terms of, in English, you call them, I don't know how you say it in German, warp and weft.
Shoes and sorry, I don't know.
Well, in
I
German,
know what you mean, but I don't know the German expression for it.
when you dress a loom, you say in English, you dress a loom. Dress means you put the warp threads, you prepare the loom and draw the threads all vertically together towards you. And then when you start to weave into them, you call it the weft in English. How you manipulate and move the weft. So I'm going to take the sheet of music, I'm taking the little loom and turning it sideways and making it into a sheet of music and going to compose it horizontally instead of in front of me, as you usually have a loom in front of you. And I don't know what notes are going to come out, but I'm sure it's going to look different.
And you mentioned before that you also like to do workshops, like you work with students, you give lectures, like
I don't teach, I don't teach, I learn. And the way I learn is to work with others.
there's this beautiful workshop you did with your daughter Ithaca in Africa. And you like the group, you all went out into the nature and collected the grass and so on, and then you started weaving.
Well, we had UNESCO here in Paris contacted me and asked if I would be willing to go to South Africa and if I would be willing to try and help people make their living by making things manually with materials that I use often. And I formed a study group, invited 4 or 5 other people at different disciplines to come with me. And they gave us the key to the old women's prison in Cape Town. Nothing in the place, completely empty, evacuated. So we found some stools and we found some tables. And then we went out and scavenged in the streets. We went to the fort, very near the women's prison in downtown Cape Town. And we walked around in the fort and around where the gardeners were cleaning up all the grounds. And we asked them if we could have the branches and have the twigs and have the leftover from their cleanup of the garden. And then we brought them back into the empty space and the patio, and we began making them interact with one another in different ways. And then we went out and saw what people were throwing away in the streets in Cape Town. So we'd go very early in the morning before the garbage truck passed, and we'd look on the sidewalks around the town and see what we could find. And whatever we could carry, we'd bring with us over to the space where we were working. And we were inventing things from nothing, from throwaways, giveaways, abandoned. It was hilarious. We came up with so many incredibly beautiful things just from recycling or from integrating what other people didn't want or were trying to dispense with, get rid of. This grew in a way that it went beyond this experiment in Cape Town. And other countries in a program with UNESCO picked up on the absurdity of the idea because it didn't cost anything. We're not buying materials or manufacturing. And we've set in motion quite a few workshops in Africa of, I wouldn't say junk or throwaways, but of recuperating things that other people no longer want and making them into something that other people want and that they're even willing to pay for. In which case you can have lunch.
Yeah. There is actually a work in the exhibition. Your gallerist told me that the seashells we see in the exhibition actually, you took these parts home after lunch one day. And there's another example exhibition where you show how to see found or used objects with different eyes. It's a pair of socks which was embroidered by nuns, and you actually exchanged with the nuns.
Well, now when you say embroidered, how do you say it in German, embroidered?
Gestickt, or in this case, geflickt, because the socks were used and they had holes, and the nuns had a technique how to make them whole again. And you thought, you saw the beauty in the stitched socks.
Right, because the embroidery implies decoration, applied decor, to embroider. But these were darned. And I wonder in German how you say darned. When you take something that has a hole and you try and...
Geflickt, we call it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what
I notice you have a very fine reference to language all the time, but also to books. You see the books as part of your projects when you do exhibitions. And so is the book design like a secret passion of yours?
Well, I like this one, this accordion book, because if you see a book like this, you think, I wonder what's inside. And if you start opening it, and you realize that it's like an accordion, and you can keep opening it.
And it's our exhibition.
That's your catalog of your show.
Yeah.
And I love the idea because I'm able to show things that I've never been able to show in books, because I get to see some of the panels that are too big, that you can't put across a page. And here on the accordion, you can get them in. Things like this. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, I can. But with this accordion, we are also back to the music theme.
And so your graphic designers were very clever. And then they did all the writing on the back. All of the texts are accordion on the back too. And so you're not turning pages in a bored way of like, what are you reading? Because as an accordion, you just sort of dance along as you read, and you just keep turning the pages before you know you've got all the way through. And I like your text in the catalog. I like very much the architect's text.
Well, there's an interview with Gita Magula, who is an architect in Vienna, and was your special wish to find an architect in Vienna who would talk to you. So you also integrated architecture in the show through the book.
That was nice. I like very much your catalog. I think your catalog is going to be widely distributed because people are quite curious about it.
Yeah.
I think I have to go and hang up the telephone. 1 minute, please.
I think it's okay. I think
good.
Is there like anything you still would like to mention about the show?
I'd like to thank your director, Christoph, because he had an awful lot of faith to do a show like this. When he came to see me in my studio in Paris, I thought he was too good to be true. Because
but you know how he actually, you know, met you. He met you through Rosemarie Schwarzwälder, who is the head of the Galerie next St. Stephan here in Vienna. And in 2018, you had a show there in the series Curator Bärbel, and this is what got it rolling, I think.
I don't know how it happened, but there's been a little series of knots tied of mini miracles that brought me into your museum, and I'm very happy and I'm very pleased. So if you ask me if I have anything more to say, I'd rather not talk about my work. I'd rather talk about how grateful I am that you've allowed me to come into your beautiful museum, which I really enjoyed. I visited it twice.
And I'm really happy that I had a chance to work with you and that you sticked, you know, with it all through this time, through the Corona crisis. And, you know, that you also gave this trust in us to install your works and the exhibition, and also, you know, give us some freedom there, you know, like a carte blanche, which I think we used.
I think we shouldn't be too proud of ourselves, but just a little bit.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, thank you, Sheila, very much for your time today. We will stay in touch and hear each other soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Auf Wiedersehen.